You may have noticed a common theme on this channel is aeronautical decision making as we review these accidents, and this accident report is no exception. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. Let's check it out. And once again, this video is brought to you by viewers like you that support this channel here on Patreon. Thank you for your support. During our recent trip to Oshkosh on the 16th of July on our way out to Oshkosh, we stopped here at Ryan's Field, Montana, with permission from the Recreational Aviation Foundation. More on that in a minute. This airstrip is located in the mountains of Montana, is 2,500 feet long, grass strip at an elevation of 3,660 feet. As you can see in the picture, this strip is cut out of the tall timber, so it's surrounded by tall trees, obstacles, and has very high terrain within close proximity of the airfield, greatly affecting the weather and the winds at the airfield. Flying out of terrain like this requires a certain level of mountain flying proficiency and a certain level of equipment suitable for the mission. On Saturday, the 26th of July, two fine gentlemen who were camping out at Ryan Field were killed when they attempted to take off on runway 15 at Ryan Field in their 1975 Grumman AA-5 Traveler aircraft. These Grumman aircraft, I used to own an AA-1. That little airplane was only powered by a little O290 Lycoming engine. This aircraft is powered by the 150 horse O320 engine. Not the best equipment for mountain flying. Aeronautical decision making. Is this the right sort of equipment to take into a field like that? Here on the Aviation Safety Network, preliminary information indicates the airplane was on the takeoff roll when it veered off and collided with terrain. Not sure that's entirely accurate, the veering off part. A post-crash fire ensued, and the density altitude was estimated at 5,264 feet. The accident occurred at 9:40 in the morning, and the winds were light and the weather was fair. Here's what Ryan Field looks like on the sectional chart, located just north and a little east of Glacier Park International, right next to the Flathead Range Mountains, towering up to 8,700 feet. Mount Jackson over here at 10,502 feet. Now, the word on the streets, and this will all have to be corroborated by the NTSB, is that the two guys in the Grumman came in from the Spokane area the day before or the night before. They did have a little trouble coming in. They did do one go around before coming in and landing and using up nearly all the runway on the landing. This picture is looking south on the runway 15 departure, which is also the normal way you want to come in and land if the winds are favorable. The two gentlemen camped out over the night, hung around the campfire and told stories like we all do, and then the next morning wanted to go out and go exploring. So it sounds like most of the camping gear was out of the aircraft at the time of the accident. This is a picture of the actual accident aircraft, November 1342 Romeo, the Grumman AA-5 Traveler, 1975. This aircraft came equipped with that 150 horsepower O320 Lycoming engine. Later versions of this aircraft were greatly improved when they added the 180 horse Lycoming engine. Nonetheless, this was a 4-seat aircraft. The model I had was the AA-1 with the O290, was a little sporty 2-seat aircraft. All of these aircraft share this bonded honeycomb style construction of the wing. It's not necessarily a true laminar flow wing, but it's a very smooth and slick wing with no rivets protruding from the surface of the wing. Also of note, they're relatively small tires, I believe 606 tires, wheel pants, and it's a castering nose wheel steering. So initially, when you start your takeoff roll, you may have to tap a little brakes to keep the aircraft straight until the rudder becomes effective fairly quickly on the takeoff roll. If we look at the rudimentary takeoff data charts available in the POH for the AA-5 Traveler aircraft, take the middle column here at 2,000 pounds. This is gross weight at 2,200. The chart is designed for hard surface runway, flaps up, presumably a level runway, and they give you some basic columns at standard temperatures: sea level, 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet, and 6,000 feet at 38 degrees Fahrenheit, which is standard temperature for 6,000 feet. So this chart does not take into account density altitude. You have to account for density altitude using the notes down here below. But the accident report indicated the density altitude was about 5,200 feet. So if we look at this column here, and at 2,000 pounds of weight total for the aircraft with zero headwind, we've got a ground run of nearly 1,100 feet, and to clear a 50-foot obstacle, 2,445 feet. So this airfield is right at the operational limits for the aircraft. And that's on a hard surface runway. There is no data or variations of the data considered for grass runways. Grass runways are going to slow down your takeoff performance. It's going to reduce your takeoff performance. It's going to slow down your ability to accelerate, especially for an aircraft that requires such a long takeoff roll. Another thing to consider is the profile of the runway surface. Rarely are these mountain airports pool table level. You can see this runway slopes downhill right down into here, into a pretty good dip, and then has a bit of a ski jump at the very end of the runway. Now, at 2,500 feet long, most properly equipped aircraft operating out of here are airborne well before this point. But in the case of the Grumman, eyewitnesses, preliminary indications at the airfield seem to indicate that this aircraft rolled all the way to the end of this runway and popped up over this ski jump and then settled down into the trees beyond. So that ski jump could potentially pop you up before the aircraft is ready to fly. Looking at the other end of the runway, you have trees that are much higher than a 50-foot obstacle on this end. This is why it's generally recommended that you land and take off on runway 15 here at Ryan Field. Now here's what it looks like blasting off in the UL Cub. Of course, this aircraft doesn't even need it but a fraction of the runway, but it'll give you an idea for the layout of the land. So narrow trees on both sides. Got to keep it on center line. There's that ski slope jump, but you've got lower terrain down and to the right. So you've got a fantastic escape route if you can clear the trees off the end of the runway, which aren't very high. Now, in order to get permission to fly into this private restricted airfield, you got to go through this organization here, the Recreational Aviation Foundation. And before you land at this airfield, you need to review and indicate that you've reviewed the briefing guide that goes with this airfield. Let's check it out. So right here to the right of the logo, pilot info, airfield guide, and safety briefings, we find all the different airfields that the RAF has access to, including Ryan Field, located right here. And over here under briefing, you've got the briefing guide. And there's also a downloadable, printable version. And over here on the left, it says this landowner, it's still privately owned by a privately owned landowner, and the Recreational Aviation Foundation administers the access to this airfield through this briefing guide and website. And it says this landowner requires that you review this briefing guide and acknowledge that you've done so by clicking on the button below. So you put your name and N number in there and click that you've reviewed this briefing, preferably before you get there. And then once you've carefully reviewed this briefing guide, you might decide with all the details that are listed in here that perhaps going 2 up in a Grumman AA-5 Traveler is not the best aeronautical decision making. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this channel possible. See you here.